Hey, this has been an awesome week, and it started really last Sunday. It was awesome to me anyway, and I hope it was awesome to you. We had one of, I think, just the best weekends ever, with it being Easter. We had 4 services all together, Friday night and 3 on Sunday morning. We had 475 people coming through this place, and that was just an amazing thing to me, and that's a little higher than what we normally run, so that's good. We these days have been running in the low to mid 200s altogether, but that's awesome when you have that. And of course there were lots of people that had come for multiple things, so it's hard to tell, but that was a lot of people coming through on Easter to hear a great message and some music, and hopefully be able to connect with people here. So that was an awesome weekend. We had 2 baptisms after one of those services too, and that was exciting as well. So that was a great weekend. On Tuesday, which was the 10th, I don't know if you noticed or if you saw it on Facebook, it was actually our 1-year anniversary since our soft launch of Renew. And really the story behind it real quick, and it was a great thing, and again, that's part of this wonderful week, and that was, my family, we moved here not too long before we soft launched, and we came in January, and I got on the ground in January, started working in the community and talking about what we were going to do, and met all kinds of people. The church was a whopping 4 people. It was myself, my wife Jennifer, who's a hospice nurse, and she's on call this morning, so she's not here, and my 2 kids. And we were just talking to everybody about what we felt like God was doing here in the community and what we were going to do. And we were intending to launch in September of this past year, and we met all kinds of people that said, we don't want to wait, we need to do it now, which scared me to death. And so I said, okay, I'm not ready, but we'll see what God has in mind. And we soft launched with 72 people in April, and a year later, on Easter, we had 475 people showing up. That's an amazing thing. God's at work, and so that's exciting. So that was part of that week, and then this weekend we were invited to go out to Fort Smith for the Arkansas Christian Convention. It's just a little convention that's out there, and they actually invited our worship team to come out and play and lead worship, and they did an amazing job. It looked like Hillsong up there, though. We had 12 people all together. I don't know if you've watched Hillsong, but they've got a lot of people up there, and there were 12 of them, with Teresa and Trendlin signing, and we had 2 electric guitars, a bass, acoustic, drums, piano, and all of that going on, and it was just awesome, and it was an amazing thing. And they asked me to come and speak and talk about this experience we had over the last year. Because in fact, at the conference last year, we were just about to get started, and they brought us up, and we're talking about, how are you feeling about it? And my answer last year was, I'm scared to death. And so we've all prayed about what God would do this year. And it was great to be able to go back and say, this is what God has been up to say that we have a church community of about 400 people. We've had 34 baptisms in our first year, and those kinds of things. And it was a great celebration. The topic, though, that I talked about all weekend long, I started talking on Friday when I got there, and whether I was on stage or in a classroom or just trying to walk to the bathroom, someone had a question for me about what we were doing. But the main topic that had been assigned to me that I spoke about on Friday and all day Saturday was, how do you build relationships out in your community? Because ultimately that is one of those things that churches do not do well generally. Churches get stuck inside of a building and they hide there, and it becomes the place we go once a week, and then we go our own ways and we never talk or see or do anything about it. And that's just not what church is. Church isn't the building, it's us, it's the people. And so they were saying, well, how do you get out and do that? And so we were talking about things like Souls on Souls program, to put shoes on cabin school kids, and our Big Serve, which is coming up in 2 weeks, and how we get out and we love on the community. But here's the thing I have found over the years, and that is, when you get outside of the building, when you begin talking about what God is up to, inevitably people will have questions. And one of the greatest questions that people have asked me over the years is this: how can I really believe in God, though? Can I believe? Now here, it really is the wrong question, because the truth is anyone can believe, but many will choose not to, right? And so it's not really the right question, but we understand what people are saying. I mean, what is the evidence? How can I believe this? Is this really true? This story about God taking flesh, walking among us, dying on a cross, rising again, like we talked about last week. Can I really believe that that's true? Or can I believe any of the things? Can I believe that that's true? And so those are the questions that people are continuing to ask. And so we're going to spend a couple of months, April and May, talking about those things, those kinds of questions. answering some of the really difficult and challenging questions that sometimes create huge doubts in our lives, or at least big question marks. And sometimes in church, the way that we handle it is we say, we're just not going to talk about those things. You just need to believe and not worry about that stuff. But I don't think that's the right answer. I think the hard questions do have answers, and you've got to talk through them because we can believe. There is wonderful opportunity to believe. God has not left us in the dark. And so we started it last week with a new series. And it basically is a series on You Can Believe. And last week with Easter, then, we talked about the first one, which is, was the resurrection really real? And I had 5 main points. It wasn't a real traditional, Easter sermon. It was more evidence of saying we can believe that the resurrection actually happened for 5 E's. The first one is Jesus really was executed. The tomb really was empty. There were early accounts in the lifetime of the people that saw it, that said they saw it. There were eyewitnesses, and at the end, the church exploded in growth amidst all of the persecution. Those are reasons we can believe in the resurrection, and it started us off. And so the question then continues through April, May, as we deal with some of those kinds of questions. For instance, was God really creator? Or is that just a fairy tale that we're supposed to believe? The idea that in the beginning God created. Is there any truth to that? Or is it just an allegory or a story or something that we're told to believe in Sunday school but no one actually believes because of biology class at high school? Can we believe that God really is creator? And so we're going to deal with some of those things through April and May. I might even talk about dinosaurs a little bit. The reason I'm going to talk, and it won't all be about science, by the way, but one reason we're going to talk about some of that is I have a very weird background, and that is I wasn't a Christian until I was about 21, and I started out being trained as a scientist. So that's kind of weird to go from being a scientist to theologian, but it's wonderful. And here's the big answer of all time, and that is faith and reason go together. Science does not detract from the Bible, and in fact, it is the opposite, that science proves that there is a creator and that you can walk out the door and believe that with 100% certainty, that God is real and He is revealed. And so that's what I actually want to just begin talking about today. And I can't cover everything. I tried in first service and I only got really one of my 5 things I wanted to talk about. So we'll see how it goes with you, okay? And then I won't remember for first service next week and I'll just repeat myself. No, not really. I'll make a note, I promise. But, no, I won't make a note. I'll remember. So I promise that I was lying to you. I'm sorry. Anyway, but we'll get as far as we can to just scratch the surface to help us understand that the truth is that God has revealed. He has revealed Himself. He has shown that He is real. He has shown that He's there. And He's done it in lots of ways. And it's important that He has. So there's a passage, it's in Deuteronomy 4:28 and 29. Let me just read it to you really quick. This is from New Living Translation. Here's There in a foreign land you will worship idols made from wood and stone, gods that neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you will, get this, you will search again for the Lord your God. And if you search for Him with all your heart and soul, you will find Him. It's not you might find Him if you search for Him with all your heart and soul. It is you will definitively find Him if you search for Him. Those who know your name trust in you. For you, O Lord, do not abandon those who search for you. I love that passage. I want to get a dry erase marker and write it on my refrigerator. It's beautiful. It says, if you seek out God, there is no question you will find Him. Another passage in Chronicles 28:9 says, for the Lord sees every heart and knows every plan and thought. If you seek Him, you will, guess what? Find Him. Lamentations 3:25, the Lord is good to those who depend on Him, to those who search for Him. God reveals. The problem, though, there are at least 2. There's probably more. But one problem is that when we seek, we are promised to find, but that is not a promise that we will follow. Does that make sense? That not everybody that seeks will follow. Some will seek and God will reveal, and people won't like what they see. There are some that will just say, I'm not interested in what God is. I'm not interested in who He is. I'm not interested in what He has to say about a whole range of topics. Whether those topics have to do with telling the truth, I may not like that, and so therefore I don't want to follow God if He's about telling the truth. Or if God talks about what sexual relationships should be like, and if I don't like that, I don't want to follow. Or whatever it is, anger. You pick any topic that there is, and if we seek God out and He has something to say about it, we get to choose, am I going to do it the way God wants me to do it, or am I just going to do it my way? And so just because we seek doesn't mean we'll follow. That's always a question. That's how we'll end up today, by the way, is will you seek Him? Has He revealed Himself? And will you follow? That's always a choice that we get to make. And by the way, that's not a one-time decision thing that someone makes and goes, yep, I'll follow, and then never have to do it again. I think following and choosing to follow is a daily process. When I get out of bed in the morning, I have to decide, am I going to do it the way God wants me to do it, or am I going to do it the way Spencer wants to do it, and ignore Him? And so just because we seek doesn't mean we follow. That's the first problem. The second problem, then, is most people just won't seek. I think part of that might be because they know what they'll find. Is that possible? Like sometimes you don't want to actually know. Like, who in here does not like to go to the doctor because you're afraid of what they'll find? Anybody in here? There's more women than men raising their hand. Guys, you're just being lazy. You're not paying attention. Pay attention. Who in here, which guys, you don't like to go to the doctor because you don't want them to find something wrong, right? That is the most ridiculous thing ever. But I do it too. I went to the doctor last week. I was scared to death. Why? Because I didn't want them to find something wrong. So I didn't want to go. I canceled that physical 3 times. And my wife's a nurse. And she says, you're a stupid man. She says that to me a lot. Usually not going to the doctor, you know, that's kind of thing. That's just how it goes. She loves me. 19 years. It's all right. You imagine being married to me 19 years. Fine. She's a saint. Anyway, so we don't sometimes want to know. So sometimes we just won't seek. Or sometimes we don't seek just because we're not interested for whatever the reason is. But many people won't seek. There's a huge problem, though, when we don't seek. You know what the problem is? Is we make up for ourselves who we want God to be when we don't seek. In other words, we will... Okay, so I've got like 5 big words I like to use at church periodically, just because it helps me out. I love to use big words, but I can't unless I define them. Here's one of my 5 big words I like to use. Ready? We anthropomorphize God all the time. Now, all that means is really simple, okay? So if I were to do this, that was cool. Pound the pulpit, you know, that kind of idea that I don't do. But if I were to do that and someone were to say, don't you hit that thing, you're going to hurt its feelings. That's anthropomorphizing the table. It's attributing human characteristics to a non-human thing. It's like when the weather's cold and you get in your car, jig, come on, baby. You can do it, Mama loves you. Come on, start. You're anthropomorphizing your car. Anyone have a name for your car? You're an anthropomorphist, okay? That's how it goes. Your car is not a human. I hate to tell you. As nice as it might be in your mind, it's not. We anthropomorphize things all the time. We give human characteristics to non-human things, and we do it to God constantly. Where we say, this is who I want God to be. You hear people say things like this. I can't believe in a God who would allow whatever. That's anthropomorphizing God. It's saying, if I don't understand who God is, I'm going to make it up for myself. And therefore, I choose not to believe if God allows this and that and whatever. The reality is God's ways and thoughts are higher and better than mine. And God paints on a canvas bigger than my eyes can behold. And so God has things in hand and does things that I just never understand. And that's just how it goes. Someone said at this conference I was at, and I'm totally going to steal it. And I'm not going to tell you who. How about that? I'm just stealing it. And then I give credit once, and then actually his name's Mark Scott. See there? That's the rule. You give credit once, and then from now on it's yours. I steal it. Okay? Here it is. And he said this. There's always that tension between free will and God's sovereignty. And he said, how about this? What if God is so sovereign, He's able to give free will? That's amazing. I love it. That idea. But the thing is we don't like it when God does stuff the way we don't want to do it. We anthropomorphize God all the time. And really what we're doing when we're not seeking and finding who God is, all we're doing is creating an idol that looks like God, that does who we want, does what we want it to be, and create who we want as God, instead of actually seeking to find out who God is. It's just the reality of how it goes. And I think we all do it at times. All of us do it at times. And so God reveals. Some will not search. Some will not seek. And even when some do seek, they won't like what they find if it doesn't fit, which is an issue of surrender. I still choose to follow God, even if He does it in a way I don't understand. And that's just a choice we get to make. And so the question then is, has God revealed? It's important, and He has. He's revealed, and it's important that we look. You know why? Because it affects every facet of our lives, how we define God. How we understand God changes the way that we see the world. It changes the ways that we hear and understand, feel. It changes the way that we make decisions in our life. It affects the way we spend money even. Would you agree that that's possible? That our understanding of who God is and how He works affects how we spend our money. It affects how we do everything. In some way it does. It affects it. And so the question is, has God revealed? Can we actually believe that the God of the Bible is who He says that He is? Or do we put our Bible on a 3-ring binder and pick and choose what we want and don't want? And I don't think that's an option that God ever gave us. Will we seek Him out? And He reveals. And so with that hugely long introduction, let me explain at least one reason that I can tell you that I know that God has revealed. It's a very personal piece for me, and it comes back to the story that I began, which is that my background is strange. I wasn't a Christian until I was about 21. I'll give you more of the story later, probably in a few weeks when we talk more about God as Creator. And in fact, this kind of turned into it a little bit, and it wasn't really my intent, but it is what God wants out of us today, so that's what we're going to do. But my story starts out as going to college and becoming what I would say a borderline agnostic, which meant I believed there was a God but did not care. Unless I was in trouble and thought I was going to die, which happened a lot in college. I'm not sure why. And I know that's hard for you to believe, but in those moments where I thought, I'm dead meat, I better do the last-ditch effort. What is the last-ditch effort? I better pray. Okay, God, I need out of this jam. And if you let me out of this jam, what do? Make a deal. I promise I'll try and go to church or be nice to somebody for once, which was really hard for me in those days. And then I'd get out of that jam, and I'd never follow through. I'd just be back to my own self. And I think most of our society sort of lives in that borderline agnosticism. I believe there's a God, but it doesn't affect my life. It doesn't influence my decisions in any way. It's just how it goes, I believe, but it doesn't really matter. And that's where I was, and I wasn't confronted with anything. I was studying to be a biologist. I was studying all the evolution and all that, which tells you this story, that there was a warm pond once upon a time. Once upon a time, there's a warm little pond. And all these inorganic materials slowly congealed together to form the most amazing thing ever, the spark of life. And that spark of life ended up being a complex cell, and that cell evolved into a fish, and that fish turned into an amphibian. That amphibian turned into a reptile. Those scales turned into feathers, and that reptile turned into a bird. And here we are. That's an amazing story. If you give it enough time, it'll happen. That's like saying if we put enough monkeys in a room with typewriters, eventually they'll type the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's the same idea. If you just give it enough time, anything can happen. And that was what I was studying and learning until I got to this very interesting idea, and that was, is it possible that God actually made it? Created it? And so here's the thing. God reveals Himself through the created order. God reveals Himself in nature. And so you tell me, just off the cuff, can you think of anything that when you look at it as a created thing, that you see a thumbprint of a creator? Is there anything out there? And the answer is, for me, now, I see it everywhere. For me, I look out at the sky on a dark night when you see all the stars, and I go, wow. I see God's thumbprint everywhere. Or have you ever stopped to imagine how many shades of green are in the world? I mean, if you had the 8-color box when you were a kid like me, because I was poor, anybody else only just have the 8 box? Yeah, we were the losers, okay? And so not like, my sister who had the 64 box with a sharpener. That's another issue. Anyway, I already talked about older brothers now a few weeks ago. Anyway, so the 8 box was 1 green, maybe 2 green. You had to cut a line and a darker green. Guess what? There are hundreds of shades of green, all in this created order and all that stuff. Here's the deal, and that is God reveals Himself in nature. He tells us about it. Look at Psalm 19, 1 through 6. And if you want to use a chair Bible, by the way, one of these are around. Psalm 19 is on page 545. If you don't have a Bible at home, take one home. It's yours as a gift, okay? But I just want to read the first part of Psalm 19. Here's what it is. It says this: "The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands." That's an amazing passage. It says that the heavens are telling the glory of God. That means that when we look out and we see stars and solar systems, and with the Hubble Space Telescope, and we look out and we look at these galaxies and things, and we see it, what should that tell us? It should tell us about the glory of God, and that the expanse is declaring the work of His hands. It means those galaxies are thumbprints of God. They're not accidents. If it were an accident, I shouldn't use this analogy, but here we go. This would be the idea, okay? Every year, I'm a little bit of a slob. So every year for Christmas, my wife gives me a box of hand grenades. And so what I do is I go into my room where I keep all my stuff, and I just pull the pin and fling one in, and I shut the door, and a few hours later I come back, and the most amazing thing has happened. All of my shirts are hung up, all my pants are in order of size and waistband, my socks are matched, shoes are lined up, and everything. It's amazing. Would you believe that? No, because you know why? Explosions don't create ordered things. And in fact, that is a principle that we know and know well. And so the idea of we look out at the expanse of the heavens and go, is this the byproduct of an explosion? The answer is that's ridiculous. And we'll talk about that more in a few weeks. But the idea is when we look out, as it says in Psalm 19, we see the thumbprint of God. Romans 1:18-21 says this: "For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse." What does that say? It says that although there's not saving knowledge in seeing a thumbprint of a creator, it says that it leaves us without excuse. For someone to get to the end of their life and say, "I never saw God revealed to me in any way," the answer would be, it's just not true. Have you ever looked at a sunrise or a sunset? Or have you ever looked at a newborn baby? Have you ever thought about all the miracles that go into a newborn baby? Many an atheist have had children born and say, "It was the first time I considered that there might really be a God." In the miracle of seeing a child born. And you know, we talk about that, but just for a moment, ponder with me, if you will, what had to go into that in order to create a child. Not the specifics, because I'm not going to teach your children this story. You know, the talk, we're not doing that today. I charge extra for that. No, I'm just kidding. But the general story is this, that when you look at a baby and look at what happened in the course of that development, it is an amazing thing. And so now Darwin's story would be that that's just a byproduct of an accident of all these chemicals coming together, and through time our DNA was mutated and changed enough to create a newborn child. But let me tell you, just give you a couple quick things, because again, this wasn't my real intent for today, but it feels like what I'm supposed to do today. So just a couple of things. Understand that every cell in your body has the same genetic code. And in fact, every body cell, every cell, whether it's in your eye or your left knee, has the same genetic package and two sets of it. Okay? Everybody understand that? It's all developed in something called deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. And all of it. And so it's all in those cells. And so the DNA in my eye is the same as the DNA in my left knee. It's only one little section is turned on in my right eye and turned on in my left knee that are different, that help it to know I'm an eye cell and I'm an E cell and I'm a pinky cell or whatever. But in our ability to create children, only half of that DNA package is in those cells, which, by the way, is amazing in and of itself. Because for an evolutionary mechanism to occur, that means that had to have happened on accident, because mutations, which is the only real mechanism for evolution, mutations don't happen because you need them to. If that were true, I would have grown a third arm a long time ago. Mutations occur randomly, by chance, and almost never are they positive things. And so in order to understand how this baby got here, you have to understand that these organisms would have developed, and somehow through mutational effect, on accident, completely random, this human being was able to develop, or other organisms that are far less complex than humans do this too. I don't know if you know that, but it does. And that they were able to create only half the genetic package instead of a double set. Only one half in that part of the male and in one part of the female, so that when they come together it makes one full set. And then when crossing over occurs, within hours of that, that embryo is now a completely, totally unique human being, no longer mom or dad. That's an amazing thing. And you start to begin to consider the complexity of that, and not just internal but external characteristics as well that allow those parts to come together in order to exchange those cells. When you think about the complexity there, it should absolutely blow your mind. And to imagine that that happened at the exact same moment in time in order to make male and female, because in order for that to occur, those exact same mutations would have had to occur in a male and a female at the exact same moment in time, randomly and separately for internal characteristics and external characteristics at the exact same moment in time in order to create sexual reproduction. To believe that that is an accident, in my mind, from a purely scientific perspective, is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And in fact, when I was a senior in college, and not a Christian yet, but on my way, that was a question I asked the professor. And I said, it's an advanced genetics class, one of those really fun classes you take before you go to med school. And I went, I'm confused. Help me understand what I just explained to you. I don't understand how, through mutational effect, we could create this thing. I just don't get it. And you know what the answer was for me? This isn't religion class. And I said, I'm not a religion guy. I'm a science guy. You've been teaching me to be a scientist. Ask questions. All I'm doing is asking questions. I got to another class. Dr. Wilson had a PhD in evolutionary biology. And we sat in this class, and he'd go around and ask us questions. And he would ask, and I'd go, but I'm confused. Here's what you want me to say, but I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me? And he would tell me to shut up and tell me to ask my priest, because I went to a Catholic college for my undergrad. And I thought to myself, if a PhD in evolutionary biology won't answer the question, I must be on something. And so I kept asking questions. It was really bad, like he started skipping because he didn't want me to ask. But I was exploring, as a scientist would explore, and look at the evidence before me and go, this doesn't make sense, that's an accident. In fact, it looks like to me that God is revealing himself in our very DNA. That God is revealing himself in nature. And you know what the decision I made was? It was, if there really is a creator, which the evidence seems to suggest that that's the case, because there's no way in my scientific mind, and I wasn't a Christian yet, if there's no way in my scientific mind to justify that random mutational effect would create this, if that's true, no creator creates something without purpose, I better figure out, what am I here for? And that led me to following Jesus. But that's not the only story, that's just one. You think about other specifics like the human eye. In fact, when you read Darwin says things like this all the time in his writings. To believe that the eye and all of its inimitable contrivances and all the things that it does, like adjusting for light and dark and being able to see far and near, all on its own, and that it does like 100,000 movements a day and all the muscles and complexities, to believe that evolved, he said, is absurd to the highest degree. That was Darwin himself to say that. But that's one of those challenges that you have to understand, that God has revealed himself in creation. Or how about another one? Well, one more. I got to give you one more. Since I'm going down this path, although it wasn't my plan, it's my path that we're taking today. So here's the plan. The bombardier beetle. Any of you ever heard of those guys? They're the most awesome beetle ever, if a beetle can be awesome. If I were to create a college, the bombardier beetle would be our mascot. They're awesome little nasty creatures. Here's why they're awesome and nasty, and show that there is a creator. You want to hear it? The bombardier beetle is just an average-looking beetle, other than it has an interesting little nozzle on its back end, and that's just the business end of what's going on inside. Inside, it has two separate chambers near the end. One is full of basically hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. And then on the other one is a hydroquinone type chemical, which is just a separate chemical. But it keeps those chemicals separate, and that's important. You know why? Because when those chemicals come together, it makes a boom. And so those chemicals are separated by two separate chambers inside of its body, and it has a third chamber inside of its body that at will, it can release those two chambers into the third chamber that contains water and a catalytic enzyme. Catalysts make things move and do stuff. It makes chemicals come together and react together. And it can do that. And it takes these two chambers, mixes it into one with a catalyst and water, and it can spray out a chemical that's almost boiling point. And it can do it 500 times a second. Now, that's a nasty little machine. But my issue would be, if that were to evolve on accident, it would mean all of those chambers and all of those chemicals and the process of the nozzle and the release would all have to evolve at the exact same moment in time. Otherwise, you'd be seeing beetles explode spontaneously. Little beetle babies, here they go. Pop, pop, pop. They didn't have it right. They hadn't mutated enough. That's just not how it goes. They would never be able to reproduce and create more beetle babies that would explode until they figured it out. It's just not possible. What happens when you see a complex system like that, where there's working parts and multiple parts that come together, and my guess is you would agree that a beetle is less complex than a human being. You should believe that. It is. Although when you look at those mechanisms, it makes you question. But the issue is, there is no way scientifically, you can take religion out of it, and ask just as a scientist, can you believe that all of those mechanisms, those complex mechanisms, evolved at the exact same moment in time in that way in order for that to work? And the answer for most scientists must be no. It doesn't work that way. The problem is many scientists have chosen not to believe because they don't want the byproduct of what it means to believe in God, which is that I need to obey. And in fact, later down the road, sometime in April and May, I'll share some of those quotes from people that say things like this. We know that spontaneous generation, like that idea of the worm pond, has been disproven over 100 years ago, Louis Pasteur. But that leads us to only one other conclusion, that of supernatural creation. We choose not to believe that on philosophical grounds. Therefore, we choose to believe the impossible, that life arose spontaneously by chance. George Wald said that, Nobel Peace Prize winner. The issue is, God has revealed himself. He's revealed himself in nature. He's revealed himself in a created order. And although there's not salvation in saying, I can see the bombardier beetle is created, not mutated, that's not saving knowledge of God. But it points to a creator who does things like raises Jesus from the dead. And if it's hard for you to believe that Jesus was who he said he was, think about the bombardier beetle and the complexities that went into that and say, this, there is no question, was created by a knowing, intelligent God who had plans for you and created you too. As complex and amazing of a creature as each one of you in this room are, God has revealed himself in nature. And that's just one of many that I want to share with you over the next few weeks. But specifically to next week, my plan is to finish. So let me just tell you one last one, just so you can take it home and contemplate it. And that is that God also reveals himself to us in our conscience. That there is something built into human beings that know the difference in right and wrong. And although we sometimes can desensitize ourselves to doing what's right, there is something internally built into us that knows the difference in right and wrong. Romans 2:14 and 15 says that every person has the law of God written on their hearts. God has hardwired into our very DNA to know the difference in right and wrong. And what does that mean? It points us toward an ultimate lawgiver if we understand inherently there's a right and a wrong. Now again, we can ignore right and wrong. We can desensitize ourselves to right and wrong. We can ignore it. But the truth is, it is built into us from our very DNA. And in fact, conscience and altruism are counterintuitive to evolution. And that is that in an evolutionary model, we are survival of the fittest. And if there's a weak one, we should kill it so there's more food for us. That's the animal behavior model. And if we are just evolved monkeys, our instinct when we see a weak person or a sick person would be to kill it, not help it and make it better. It is the opposite of what we would expect if there was no creator. In fact, God has created in us a sense of right and wrong, a sense of doing good for those who can't do good for themselves, to help the weak, the poor, and the hungry. That's hardwired into our very DNA because we are in the image of God, not in the image of the monkey. So, just two of many reasons why we can believe that there's a God, and we can believe that God has revealed himself to us. But the question is, so what? Why is that important to us today? Why deal with it? Why discuss it? Why even question it? Because the paradigm out there is to not question it. The paradigm out there is to just go along with it, to have your faith separate from what you might learn in a biology class. I've been a biology teacher, by the way, and I can tell you all that stuff. But here's the thing. God has revealed himself, and it makes a difference. And by the way, if you have an enemy that you want to defeat in a debate, and I love to debate, especially this topic, it's one of my faves. So if you want to, go at it sometime, give me a call, have some fun, that kind of thing. But if we were to debate it, if I were to debate someone, you know what I would pick on, whether I was an attorney or a scientist or whatever it is, what would be the best thing you could pick on if you were a debater? It would be their opening statement. The very first thing that they say, if I can discredit that, they won't listen to another word. If you were the devil and you want to discredit God, what would be the very first thing you'd love to discredit? In the beginning, God created. It's on purpose. And you got to know the evidence is that God is creator. And that he has revealed himself in nature. And that he has revealed himself through conscience. And other ways we'll talk about next week. And so, where do we go from here? Why is this important? It's so simple. It's not complex in any way, shape, or form. The where do we go from here is this. Choose to seek. Because if you seek him, you will find him. One reason I love Renew is because we have people in this church every week that have believed all their lives. Although I think we have fewer of those here than any other group, which is even better. But we have people here who have believed all their lives. But we have other people here who have believed for a very short amount of time because God has moved in their heart and they want to follow. And we have other people that sit in this room every week that say, I'm not sure I buy God at all. I'm not sure I buy Jesus, but I like the community. And it feels good here. And I like the music. Preacher kind of stinky, but I love the music. We got people all the time that are there. And that's awesome. You're in the right place. But let me tell you, don't stay there. Keep moving forward. Even if you've been a believer all your life, don't camp out there, stick a flag and go, good, I've made it. Keep moving. Keep growing. Keep challenging yourself to grow in the nurture and admonition of the Lord for yourselves and for your kids and for others' kids and for others in the room and outside this building. That's the call to believe, to seek God and to follow. Not seek him and say, if I don't like what I see, I'm out, which is what so many do. Not seek him and go, well, if I don't like something, I'll just dismiss that part. I like Jesus and all that he does, except these 2 or 3 things. We're not invited to do it. It is to seek God and to follow. And my hope and my prayer every day is that you will follow. And not just a one-time thing, that you will follow all the days of your life. And it will be contagious in our community, to your children, to one another. And that we will grow in that. And that we will experience the absolute, overwhelming love of Jesus and what he's going to do to forgive you for everything you have ever done. Everything. Wash it clean and to make you whole and complete and to let you grow and live in him. It changes everything when you understand who God really is. So this morning, let how God has revealed himself in nature and in conscience concrete in your faith to say there is a God who has a plan for you, who loves you and is calling you to himself. The answer is follow. And if you can't follow yet, seek and keep seeking. We'll be patient with you and we'll love you through it. Ask questions. Don't be afraid. Keep seeking. Strive to follow. Call in the name of the Lord and you'll be saved. That's good. So this morning, that's where I got to finish. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to invite you to come back and pray with me. If you want to make a decision to follow, if you need help seeking, or you just need something in general, has nothing to do with anything I said, that's okay. Come and talk to me for a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up here in just a few minutes. Let me pray. God, touch our very hearts. Change us to be who you want us to be. Help us to quit fighting you, to have our own way. Instead, God, help us to surrender and let it be your way. in whatever it is. Whatever struggles in life that we have decided are too big for you, let us give them up. And for the things that we struggle with in our faith, the things that are too hard to believe in with you, or the things that we may not like, help us to get rid of those and to just be all in with you and accept you for who you really are. Change our very way of thinking so that you can change our hearts from the inside out and make us to be the people you call us to be. Let this message resonate in our hearts all week as we look at your creative order, as we look at nature, as we think about right and wrong, and let it confirm for us over and over again that you are God, there is no one like you, and that you love us so much you were willing to die in our place so that we can be forgiven and be with you forever. Let that be our own prayer today as we leave this place. And now, Lord, prompt us to move and to take action if we need to.